And there we are. Here's another Friday, and here I am again. Welcome to the Road to Recovery, the Road to Freedom with Mark. This is my 28-minute slot every Friday where I bring to you a story and I talk a little bit about my pet subject, which is depression. And I have suffered from depression for many, many years, and really, realistically, I think I've probably suffered from depression my whole life. I certainly remember times of meltdowns, breakdowns when I was young, and very high highs and very low lows. I used to write furiously. I would write every day, 7 days a week, and I wrote probably thousands of pieces while I was overseas, and when I got back I burned them all. I lit the lot and I burned it all to free myself of the past and the things that went wrong, because it wasn't all plain sailing. I spent 7.5 years overseas, and some of those times I struggled. It's very, very difficult when you're on your own, and it's the same thing with mental illness. When you're on your own, you're going to struggle. You're going to struggle and you're going to fail. And you're going to continue to fail until you change something. And it is when you ask for help. That is the watershed. That is the changing point. That is the time when things, I guarantee you, will get better. Talk to a doctor, talk to a psychiatrist, get some decent drugs, but also don't underestimate the power of friends and family. My friends and family, and especially my friends, more than my family, they were a little bit slow to sort of understand and pick things up. They eventually came round and they've accepted things as they are. But my friends, most importantly, dragged me through, and all the false friends, all the acquaintances fell away. And just a few stuck with me, my true friends, my trusted friends. They helped me when I was down, fed me, gave me a place to stay, included me, and I will be grateful for the rest of my days for my friends and what they did for me in those terrible times of darkness. And that is my recommendation. Don't just talk to doctors. That's okay. That's all good. It's important. But talk to your friends. And I know it's difficult and it's embarrassing, and mental illness in this country is treated as a joke. You hear these adverts, oh, the boss has gone mad. Oh, he's discounted everything. It seems to be some kind of humorous little joke, and that bothers me more than I can tell you. What we need to do is have a culture change, a culture shift, and look at mental illness and realise that that's what it is. It's illness, just like any other illness, like tuberculosis or the friggin' plague. It needs to be addressed, and it's not being addressed. Now, you're being invited to go online or make an 0800 call and make a contribution to what you think should change in mental health. How effective do you really think that's going to be, my friends? You're just slapping it with a wet bus ticket, really. It needs some serious overhaul. Unfortunately, for decades now, consecutive governments have swept the problem under the carpet, and it is an issue that will never go away, and it will cost lives. People commit suicide, unfortunately, and the ramifications, the fallout from that is just enormous. It destroys so many lives. That is something that we really need to address, and I can't see it happening in the near future, but I hope, with this government at least, they seem to be doing a lot. They're getting a hell of a lot of flack, a hell of a lot of criticism about not doing enough, but as far as I'm concerned, at least they're making an effort and doing something and spending some money on social services. So, yes, they are beginning to address the problem, but that is only a beginning. We need to be thorough about this and look after everyone who suffers from mental health. And that doesn't mean that you're stuffed forever. You can still function, you can still do things, you can still achieve. achieve. I certainly did a lot with my life, and I've written what I think is some pretty damn good stories. It doesn't affect your ability, but it does affect your life, and that's something that's got to be addressed. Now, I've made the odd referral in my stories to drugs. I want to read you a little something because I am anti-drugs. I don't like them, and they affect people so badly. P especially has become a scourge in this country, and it needs to be stamped out because it just does damage. So here's a little piece I wrote. Drugs. The old familiar welcomes me in, covers me with warmth, though I know it's a sin. The old familiar takes away my pain, eggs me ever on when I want to refrain. Freedom's a bird, always in flight, and I can't let go, try as I might. The old familiar has no eyelids, he chokes my soul with his endless stare. The old familiar will never let me go, and truth be told, I need him so. I am lost within his dream, trapped in the thoughts of what could have been. Right, on with today's story. Time is marching on and we only have 28 minutes, so here we go. Victoria Falls in Whangi Game Park. 4 of us, Seedy, Wayne, Dave and myself, drove west across the northern Kalahari. We had just come from Chobe National Game Park in Botswana and headed into Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe. Mugabe had only been in power for a few years, and Zimbabwe, though now poor, still had signs of what a rich country it was when it was southern Rhodesia. The many years of war, however, had financially crippled the new Zimbabwe, and no improvement was in sight. This meant the tourists who did venture up had plenty to spend, and there was no shortage of accommodation. As we left Chobe, the desert started to take over again. So I drove from dawn till dark to get through to Victoria Falls. It is also named the Smoke That Thunders, and a few kilometres from the falls we could hear the falls and see the mist in the sky above. Victoria Falls are reputed to be the largest in the world, and they are truly a sight to behold. Even before we lay eyes on them, they impress with a mighty thundering sound as we approach. The mighty Zambezi River feeds this natural wonder, and at first it is hard to take it all in, as it is some 1,700 metres long and some 100 metres from top to bottom. The Zambezi spills over a level sheet of basalt, making the drop sharp and spectacular. It is so sharp the falling water creates a permanent mist, rising high in the air to about 400 metres. It creates a rainbow above the falls by day, and a lunar moonbow can be seen on full moon. The spray comes shooting upwards like inverted rain. Despite having been discovered by Livingstone as late as 1855, it has captivated tourists ever since, and we were no exceptions. We spent the best part of the first day there on the more spectacular Zimbabwe side, where it is possible to get right up to the edge of the falls and see the bottom. It was slippery and dangerous at the edge, but well worth the risk for the view. We were there in late summer, so the falls had reduced to a series of about 9 discernible falls, each one of them impressive in itself, but the series together was truly breathtaking. At the end of the falls were a load of the biggest crocodiles I have ever seen, with the falls acting like a smorgasbord for the massive beasts. The next day we crossed up to Zambia via Victoria Falls Bridge, which allows a unique view up the falls. Zambia was in a worse financial state than Zimbabwe, and black market money traders haggled openly for hard currency right outside the border guard's building. We left the car at the border and took a taxi to the nearest town to get on the gin and tonics. We then returned to one of the safari lodges where we had a fine meal on a riverfront as we watched the sun go down. Unfortunately, we drank too much and got stuck in Zambia when we missed the border closing. We were forced to sleep in the open despite the warning signs of roaming lions. We ended up instead being eaten alive by mosquitoes, but relieved the next morning. We spent a few days at Victoria Falls, viewing them from every way possible, spellbound by their great length and volume. The weather was very hot and lent itself to drinking and wandering along the falls. Altogether too soon, it was time to leave Victoria Falls and head south to Wangi National Game Park. Wangi Park is dotted with natural waterholes called pans. Some are fed by natural springs and some by two large lakes in the north of the park. We were immediately impressed by the infrastructure of the park. We headed to the northern section and booked into Cinnamantella Camp. The camp was a fenced compound on the top of a hill with great views. It also had a small shop run by a local guy who we called Phil for short. He was a very happy and personable guy and sorted out a 2-bedroom hut for us, which had a fridge and even featured a hot bath. We decided to make Cinnamantella our base camp and concentrate our game spotting to the northern section of the park. At the nearest waterholes we were met with another luxury, viewing platforms. These platforms were 1 story high with stairs leading up to glass enclosed rooms where it was safe to view all the game that came down to drink. The platform also offered shade from the oppressive heat of midday sun. The watering holes or pans were like magnets for game. Each type of game had a turn at the watering hole, so it wasn't necessary to chase the game about. Whilst at one viewing platform, I met a biologist who was on holiday. He pointed out many different species of birds to me, which made for great viewing with binoculars. It opened up another layer of life to me and emphasised just how busy the watering holes really were. Wangi boasts many hundreds of species of birds, so there was a constant change of different birds to view. The larger game, however, were truly breathtaking. By being out of sight and smell from the larger animals, they would approach without fear or inhibition. The funniest to watch were the giraffes, which had great difficulty getting their long necks down to drink. They have to buckle their front knees inwards and lower their long necks down, leaving them in a very vulnerable position. They will only drink when they are sure there are no lions on the prowl, usually in the heat of the day. On our first day at Wangi, we were treated by a smorgasbord of different game at the waterhole, from giraffes in the middle of the day to various antelope in the afternoon, to elephants in the early evening to sunset. Each species seemed to have a certain time of day they preferred to drink, so it was unnecessary to move from our superb viewing platform. They also seemed to have different personalities, with some like gazelles always tense and nervous, whilst the likes of the elephants were very relaxed and came to bathe and play. Alright, we'll take a little break and not just poetry and stories, but a little bit of music from my personal collection. It is a New Zealand band, of course. I mean, that's what Aero Radio play, and it's a personal favourite of mine. I hope you enjoy it.
same thing. Everybody wants the same thing, to see another birthday. Look at all the pretty numbers. Look at all the pretty numbers scattered on the calendars. I can see my reflection. I can see my reflection in the shop window. Who owns that space? Declare it if you dare tonight. Let the moment pass until another day. Bright lights dissolve like sugar deep inside you now. All ends up the same somehow. I'm hardly here at all. Yeah. All the trash and the treasure, all the trash and the treasure, all the pain and the pleasure. Taste the edible flowers. Taste the edible flowers scattered in the salad days. Who owns that space? Declare it if you dare tonight. Don't let the moment pass until another day. Bright lights dissolve like sugar deep inside you now. Still the rain keeps coming down. I'm hardly here at all. Everything's gone quiet now. I'm hardly here at all.
Welcome back. This is The Road to Recovery, The Road to Freedom with Mark. And time's a ticking, so we've got to crack on. I love that song. Bright lights dissolve like sugar deep inside you. Still the rain keeps coming down. I'm hardly here at all. There's a man who's suffered from depression and understands the dark past. All right, we're going to crack on with today's story. Victoria Falls and Whangi National Game Park. At the end of the first superb day of game spotting, we returned to Cinnamantella Camp for dinner and the luxury of a hot bath. The camp being on a hill meant great viewing across the surrounding countryside, so we had great game spotting until sunset. The next day we got up early to make the most of the change of light when predators are on the prowl. Despite the early rise, we did not see a kill, as these are few and far between. Instead, we spent a great day at the viewing platforms where we were treated to some amazing sights. At one stage we saw some beautiful kudu come down to drink. First the large males with their beautiful corkscrew horns came down and checked out the water for crocodiles, stamping it then sipping cautiously. These beautiful antelope then formed up like sentinels, making a corridor for the females and young to walk down. The males stood guard, facing outwards, while the females and young took a drink. When they finished, they melted away, slow and orderly, like a military exercise. It was amazing to see the degree of caution and cooperation the kudu showed, something no zoo could ever show. Every species seemed to have instinctive and sophisticated survival behaviour, which was amazing to witness. During the afternoon, on the second day, we heard a strange tapping sound on the hubcaps. We came down from the viewing platform to find the strangest looking birds tapping away at the tyre valves. Called hornbills, these medium-sized clowns, a little smaller than a chicken, had large bills like macaws. They showed no fear of us and happily pecked away until we grabbed them by the bill and moved them away. Undeterred, they came back for more, until we tired of our little game and left them to peck away until they lost interest. The confidence of one animal seemed to flow on to others, and it was amazing to see so many different animals drinking with such a relaxed attitude. The huge numbers of animals the water holes attract were quite staggering, and it was a real privilege to experience game spotting at its best. On our return to camp each night, we were spoiled to a hot bath by Phil, the store manager, who lit the fire to heat the drum of water. On a whim, we asked Phil if he could get us a couple of dozen beers for us. Ever helpful, he advised he would have some for us by the end of the next day. Unbeknown to us, he got his younger brother to cycle some 20 kilometres to the nearest safari lodge to pick some up for us. When we found this out, we paid the helpful lad $10 for his troubles, and he thought Christmas had come. As our stores got low, we tried some of the antelope Phil had hanging in the cool store and made ourselves sick on the unusually gamey meat. After that, we were a little bit more cautious with the exotic foods available. On the third day, we arrived back at camp just on sunset, and Phil was jumping around our lodge in an excited state. I parked up and jumped out as Phil shouted and pointed. With my binoculars handy and our high vantage point, I quickly picked up the lion he was pointing out. Down on the plain, a single lion was hunting a warthog. It slowly crept up on its prey, using the long grass to disguise it. Once within striking distance, it broke cover and sprinted towards the unsuspecting hog. As soon as the hog spotted the lion, it squealed and sprinted off, but to no avail. The lion swiped the hog across the shoulder and sent it sprawling across the ground. With one quick leap, it was upon the hog, grabbing it by the throat, quickly choking the life out of its poor victim. A great amount of dust was kicked out by the scuffle that ensued, and I lost sight of the pair. After a tense minute or so, the lion appeared, dragging the hog by the throat. The entire kill took only a few minutes. It was a case of right time, right place. It was so captivating that those few minutes felt like an hour. With so much game around, the lions looked in splendid condition. They were massive animals, which were difficult to spot as they used the long grass to camouflage themselves. By staying still, their colour blends in perfectly. To see a kill from the high vantage point of the camp made the whole thing perfect. Phil was very happy for me, as these kinds of scenes are very rare. We decided to stay at Cinnamon Camp for as long as possible, as every day was full of great game spotting. Although there were huge amounts of game about, they seemed much better catered for by the system of watering holes about. Thanks to the watering holes, the game get precious water at the height of summer when it is needed most. But it was obvious the game park was well past its heyday when southern Rhodesia was rich. The Civil War had financially crippled the country, and the game park was a shadow of its former self. Even in the early years of Mugabe's reign, Zimbabwe struggled. Poverty in the country was rampant, and farmers were being driven off their land only to see it fall into rack and ruin. The currency was not recognised in other banks, and inflation was running rampant. The future for parks like Hwangi National seemed tenuous at best. Unfortunately, civil war was rampant in southern Africa, with Angola and Mozambique at war, and South Africa seemingly on the brink. The game parks rely on tourist dollars, and war frightens them off for many years. Special places like Hwangi National Game Park would never be able to reach the glory days of old when hunters paid huge prices to shoot trophy animals. In stark contrast to the rampant poverty in society, countries like Zimbabwe are rich in natural minerals like copper, platinum and gold. Huge profitable mines employing tens of thousands of miners are all over southern Africa, but the region is fraught with social problems. Illiteracy is rampant, and people in their millions live in slum conditions. All the time, civil unrest boils along, simmering over every now and then. Zimbabwe was a microcosm of southern Africa itself, with gems like Victoria Falls and Hwangi Game Park, and huge mineral wealth. A country with massive potential that should be rich, but instead was poisoned by minority rule, then ravaged by ugly civil war. Finally ending up with a dictator was the final nail for Zimbabwe. It is impossible to visit southern Africa and not be awe-inspired by its natural beauty. So too, it's impossible not to feel for all the poor souls who suffer poor governments. I feel like I lost some of my innocence there, and there seems no easy solutions for the problems of the region. In the many years since I visited the region, the ANC's Mandela government came and went and delivered hope without solutions. Many South Africans of all races emigrated to Australia and New Zealand. Successive governments have failed on schooling, health and employment. Zimbabwe, slowly strangled by Mugabe's rule, has suffered badly, but places like Hwangi still exist as destinations for those keen for adventure. For my part, my feeling is of great contrast. I will never forget the falls and the beauty of Hwangi Park. I hold out hope for these magnificent places and their beautiful country. Yet I feel such sorrow as the people of Zimbabwe suffer. I hope someday soon democracy will help them to a better place. I know I will never forget our adventures in the blazing sun. I leave some part of me there and take the memories of those sunsets in return. The end. Well, our time is up. My 28 minutes just blasted past, so I've got to say goodbye real quick. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. I love bringing it to you. My special thanks to Michael and Veronica, who have been wonderful to me and do a fantastic job down here at Arrow. I hope this thing continues. We would love a sponsor for the show if that's at all possible. But for as long as we can, we'll continue to do the good work. I hope you enjoy it. I love bringing it to you, and I'm looking forward to next week. So bye for now. Thanks.